sacred scripture and holy books, such as the Vedas and the Upanishads in India. In those days, there was only one spiritual treatise that was acknowledged as containing the essence of all Vedas and Upanishads, that is, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. In this sense, the Gita is an essential treatise, that is, one containing the essence for gaining deliverance and prosperity. When compared to reading scripture for learning, it is always more profitable to listen to it. Because of the clear pronunciation and intonation, listening to the spoken text lends itself to better concentration and comprehension. This is the essential purpose behind presenting the Yatharth Gita through audio cassettes. By listening to these audio cassettes, even our children from far and near can benefit by absorbing the noble culture of the Supreme Being. The atmosphere surrounding each of our households shall reverberate with the spiritual echo of the Gita, the celestial song, like a sacred grove. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Yatharth Gita, Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 7. Immaculate Knowledge. The foregoing chapters contain almost all the main issues that are brought up in the Gita. There has been an elaborate presentation of the way of selfless action and the way of knowledge, of the nature of action and yajna, as well as the mode of their performance and their consequence, of the meaning of yoga and its outcome, and of divine manifestation and varnasankar. The importance of waging war, of action, for the welfare of mankind, even by men who abide in God, has been stressed at length. In the next chapters, Krishna will take up some other supplementary questions in the context of subjects that have already been touched upon, and whose resolution will be of assistance in the act of worship. In the last verse of chapter 6, the Yogeshwar Krishna himself laid the basis of a question by stating that the best yogi is one whose self abides in God. What does abiding firmly in God mean? Many yogi attain to God, but they feel something missing somewhere. When does that stage appear at which there is not even the least imperfection? When does perfect knowledge of God come about? Krishna now speaks of the state in which such knowledge is attained to.
Mayyasaktamana partha yogam yunjanmadashrayah asaushayam samagram mam yatha gyasyasi tachrinu.
The Lord said, "Listen, O Parth, to how by taking refuge in me and practicing yoga with devotion, you shall know me beyond any doubt as the all-perfect soul in all beings." The essential precondition of this complete awareness of God should be carefully noted. If Arjuna wishes to have such knowledge, he has to practice yoga with devotion and by casting himself at God's mercy. But there are several other aspects of the problem which Krishna is going to dwell upon, and he tells Arjuna to listen carefully to him so that all his doubts are resolved. The importance of perfect knowledge of the many glories of God is stressed again.
Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshamyasheshatah yajñātvā neha bhūyonyat gyātavyam avashishyate.
I shall fully teach you this knowledge, as well as the all-pervasive action that results from realization of God, Vigyan, after which there remains nothing better in the world to know. Krishna offers to enlighten Arjuna fully on the knowledge of God, along with the knowledge that is here called Vigyan. Knowledge is the attainment, in the moment of accomplishment, of the substance of immortality, Amritatva, that is generated by yajna. Direct perception of the essence of God is knowledge. But the other knowledge, called Vigyan, is the attainment by an enlightened or realized sage of the ability to act simultaneously everywhere. It is the knowledge of how God at the same time operates in all beings. It is the knowledge of how he makes us undertake action and of how he enables the self to travel across the way to the identical Supreme Spirit. This way of God is Vigyan. Krishna tells Arjuna that he is going to explain this knowledge to him fully, after knowing which there will be nothing better in the world for him to know. True knowers are much too few.
Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschidhyatati siddhaye yatataamapi siddhanam kaschinmam vetti tatvatah.
Hardly does one man among thousands strive to know me, and hardly does one among the thousands who strive for this know my essence. Only rarely does a man endeavor to realize God, and among those who strive to do so, there is scarcely a man who succeeds in knowing his reality by direct perception. Now, where is this total reality, the entire essence? Is it stationary at one place as a corporal body, a lump of matter, or is it all-pervading? Krishna now speaks of this.
Bhumirapo nalo vayu kham mano buddhireva cha ahankara iti yam me bhinna prakritirashtadha.
I am the creator of all nature with its 8 divisions: earth, water, fire, wind, ether, mind, intellect, and ego. From Krishna, God, has arisen nature with all its components. This nature with its 8 parts is the lower nature.
Apareyamitastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat.
This nature, O the mighty-armed Arjuna, is the lower, insensate nature. But against it there is my conscious, living nature, which animates the whole world. The nature with 8 parts is God's lower nature, dull and insensible. But along with this, there is his conscious nature, which impregnates and gives life to the whole world. But the individual soul, too, is nature, because it is associated with the other, lower nature.
Etadyonini bhutani sarvani tyupadharaya aham kritsnasya jagatah prabhavah pralayastatha.
Know that all beings arise from these 2 natures, and that I am both the creator and the end of the whole world. All beings spring from these animate and inanimate natures. These are the two sources of all life. God, Krishna, is the root of the whole universe, both its creator and its destroyer. It springs from him and is also dissolved in him. He is the spring of nature as long as it exists, but he is also the power that dissolves nature after a realized sage has overcome its limitations. But this is a matter of intuition. Men have always been intrigued by these universal questions of creation and destruction, what is sometimes called doom. Almost all holy books of the world have attempted to explain these phenomena in one way or another. Some of them insist that the end of the world, or doom, is brought about by submersion under water, while according to others the earth is annihilated because the sun comes too close to it and burns it. Some call the event the day of final judgment, the day on which God judges all beings, while others explain away the idea of doom as a recurrent feature or as dependent on a specific cause. According to Krishna, however, nature is without beginning and end. Changes there have been, but it has never been completely destroyed. According to Indian mythology, Manu experienced a doom in which 11 sages had sailed by tying their boat to the fin of a fish to a towering peak of the Himalayas and found shelter there. In the sacred composition called the Srimad Bhagavat, which is contemporaneous with Krishna, God came down to earth for his pleasure, and dealing with his life and precepts, the sage Mrikandu's son, Markandeyaji, has rendered an account of the doom he claims to have seen with his own eyes. He lived on the north of the Himalayas, on the bank of the Pushpabhadra River. According to chapters 8 and 9 of the 12th section of the Srimad Bhagavat, the great sage Shaunak and some others told Sutji, a pupil of Vyas, the author of the Bhagavat, that Markandeyaji had had a vision of Balmukund, infant Vishnu, on a banyan leaf. But the difficulty was that he belonged to their lineage and was born only some time before them. And it was a fact that the earth was never submerged and destroyed after his birth. With all this, how was it possible that he had beheld destruction of the earth? What kind of deluge was it? Sutaji told them that, pleased with his prayers, God had manifested himself to Markandeyaji, who had then expressed his wish to see God's Maya, driven by which the soul has to wander through endless births. God had granted his wish, and one day, when the sage was sitting absorbed in contemplation, he saw towering, furious waves of the sea hurtling onto him from all sides. Terrible fishes leapt from the waves. He scurried here and there to save himself. The sky, the sun, the moon, heaven itself, and all the constellations were drowned in the flood. In the meantime, he saw a banyan tree with an infant on one of its leaves. As the child breathed in, Markandeyaji was drawn inside him by the inrushing air, and there he discovered his hermitage, along with the solar system and the whole universe, alive and intact. Soon after, he was cast out with an exhalation. When his eyes opened at last, Markandeyaji found himself safe on his seat in his hermitage. So whatever he had seen was but a dream, a vision. It is evident that the sage had this divine transcendental vision, this intuitive experience, only after worship spread over years beyond reckoning. It was a perception by his soul. Everything outside was the same as before. So doom, also, is an event that is revealed by God within the heart of a yogi. When, at the completion of the process of worship, worldly influences cease to be, and only God remains in the yogi's mind, that is doom. This dissolution is not an external phenomenon. Final doom, or dissolution, is the inexpressible state of the total identity of soul with God, while the body yet exists. This is something that can be felt through action alone. Whether it is you or me, we are victims of delusion if we judge by the mind alone. This is what we are now told.
मत्तः परतरं नान्यत् किञ्चिदस्ति धनञ्जय मयि सर्वमिदं प्रोतं सूत्रे मणिगणा इव.
There is, O Dhananjay, not even one object other than me, and the whole world is linked up with me, like the pearls of a necklace. There is absolutely nothing else except God, and the whole world is tied up with Him. But it is possible to know this only when, as it was said in the first verse of the chapter, one engages in yoga with total resignation to God, and never before this. Participation in yoga is an indispensable necessity.
रसोऽहमप्सु कौन्तेय प्रभास्मि शशिसूर्ययोः प्रणवः सर्ववेदेषु शब्दः के पौरुषं नृषु.
O Arjun, I am that which makes water liquescent, the radiance in the sun and the moon, the sacred syllable Om, the words echo, Shabda, in the ether, and I am also the manliness in men. God is all these and all knowledge, and the whole wisdom of the Ved has been breathed forth from Him. He is also much more.
पुण्यो गन्धः पृथिव्यां च तेजश्चास्मि विभावसौ जीवनं सर्वभूतेषु तपश्चास्मि तपस्विषु.
I am the fragrance in the earth, the flame in fire, the soul that animates all beings, and the penance of ascetics. God pervades the whole universe, the earth, the fire, all creatures, and even the severe spiritual austerities that are practiced by ascetics. He dwells in every atom.
बीजं मां सर्वभूतानां विद्धि पार्थ सनातनम् बुद्धिर्बुद्धिमतामस्मि तेजस्तेजस्विनामहम्.
Since I am also the intellect in wise men, and the magnificence of men of glory, know you, O Arjun, that I am the eternal fountainhead of all beings. God is the seed from which all creatures are born. Moreover,
बलं बलवतां चाहं कामरागविवर्जितं धर्माविरुद्धो भूतेषु कामोऽस्मि भरतर्षभ.
I am, O the best of Bharat, the selfless power of the strong, and I too am the aspiration for realization in all beings that is never hostile to God. God is the righteous aspiration of the mighty, and also their strength which is free from all desire. Doesn't everyone in the world wish to be strong? Some endeavor to achieve it through physical exercise, and some through the amassing of nuclear weapons. But Krishna affirms that he is the strength that is beyond all desire and attachment. This is true strength. He is also in all beings the aspiration that is propitious for Dharma. God alone is the real Dharma. The immortal soul that holds all within himself is Dharma. And God is also that craving which is not inimical to Dharma. Krishna had prompted Arjuna earlier to aspire to the realization of God. All desires are forbidden, but yearning for the attainment of God is essential, because we cannot be inclined to worship in its absence. This hunger for God is also a gift from Krishna.
ये चैव सात्विका भावा राजसास्तामसाश्च ये मत्त एवेति तान् विद्धि न त्वहं तेषु ते मयि.
And know that although all the properties of nature, tamas, rajas, and sattva, have arisen from me, they neither dwell in me nor do I dwell in them. All the properties of nature, ignorance, passion, and virtue, are born from God. Yet, however, he is not in them, and they are not in him. He is not absorbed in them, and they cannot enter into him, because he is unattached to and unsullied by them. He has to gain nothing from nature or its properties, and so they cannot taint him. Despite this, however, as the body's hunger and thirst are caused by the soul, and yet the soul is wholly unconcerned with food and water, even so, although nature arises from God, he is untouched by its properties and activities.
त्रिभिर्गुणमयैर्भावैः एभिः सर्वमिदं जगत् मोहितं नाभिजानाति मामेभ्यः परमव्ययम्.
Since the whole world is deluded by feelings resulting from the operation of the three properties, it is unaware of my imperishable essence that is beyond them. Blinded by feelings associated with the operation of tamas, rajas, and sattva, men fail to perceive the indestructible and the one reality that is God, quite beyond the properties of nature. So he cannot be known if there is even the slightest trace of these properties. So long as these properties envelop the worshipper's mind, his journey is incomplete. He has still to go along. He is still on the way.
दैवी येषा गुणमयी मम माया दुरत्यया मामेव ये प्रपद्यन्ते मायामेतां तरन्ति ते.
This divine, three-propertied Yogamaya of mine is most difficult to overcome. But they who seek refuge in me get over the illusion and achieve salvation. God's celestial Maya, the power from which the empirical universe is evolved, is most difficult to comprehend. But they who are always engaged in the worship of God navigate safely across it. This Maya is called divine. But that does not mean that we should start burning incense sticks as a reverent offering to it. It should never be forgotten that it is something that we have to vanquish and get across.
Namam dushkritino mudha प्रपद्यन्ते नराधमाः माययापहृतज्ञाना आसुरं भावमाश्रिता.
The ignorant and unwise are the most despicable of men and doers of wickedness, because, deluded by Maya and having demoniacal qualities, they do not worship me. They who contemplate and adore God know this, and yet there are many others who do not worship. Men with evil propensities whose discrimination has been ravished by Maya, the meanest among mankind who are immersed in lust and anger, do not worship God. In the following verse, Krishna turns to worshippers.
चतुर्विधा भजन्ते मां जनाः सुकृतिनोऽर्जुन आर्तो जिज्ञासुरर्थार्थी ज्ञानी च भरतर्षभ.
Four kinds of devotees, O Arjun, the best of Bharat, worship me. The ones who desire material rewards, the distressed, those who aspire to know me, and men of knowledge. The four kinds cover all worshippers. There are first those who do the appointed task, because doing it will bring good fortune. They are the doers of selfish action. There are then men who devote themselves to God because they wish to be liberated from grief. Yet other devotees long to have a direct perception of God. And lastly, there are the wise men, the realized sages, who have attained to the stage of reaching the supreme goal. Material wealth is the means that sustains the body, as well as all its relations. So riches and satisfaction of desires are first provided by God. Krishna says that he is the provider of means, but his words suggest more than this. The really lasting wealth is made of spiritual acquisition. This is the real treasure. While a worshipper is busy toiling for material gains, God prompts him on towards spiritual achievements, because he knows that spiritual merits are man's real wealth, and that his worshipper will not always be contented with material acquisitions alone. So he also begins to bestow spiritual riches on him. Granting profit in the mortal world and support in the next world are both God's burden. Under no circumstance does he leave the worshipper unrecompensed. There are then worshippers with grief-laden hearts. There are also among worshippers of God men who wish to know him fully. Men who have attained knowledge of God by perception also worship him. Thus, according to Krishna, four kinds of men are his devoted adorers. But of all of them, the worshipper with the wisdom that comes from perception is the most superior. The significant point is, however, that this sagacious man is a devotee also. Among all these kinds,
तेषां ज्ञानी नित्ययुक्त एकभक्तिर्विशिष्यते प्रियो हि ज्ञानिनोत्यर्थम् अहं स च मम प्रियः.
to the wise man of knowledge who worships me, the one God, with steady love and devotion, I am the dearest, and so is he to me. Of all worshippers, they love God most who have been enlightened by perception, and who therefore abide in him with single-minded devotion. This feeling is reciprocated, for God also loves this worshipper more than anyone else. This wise man corresponds to God, and
उदाराः सर्व एवैते ज्ञानी त्वात्मैव मे मतम् आस्थितः sahi yuktatma mamevānuttamāṃ gatim.
Although they are all generous because they worship me with devotion, the wise man of realization is, I believe, identical with me, his supreme goal. All the four kinds of worshippers are portrayed as generous. But what charity have they shown? Does God benefit by a worshipper's devotion? Do they give him something he does not have? Obviously, the answer to all these questions is a clear no. It is really God alone who is magnanimous. He is ever ready to save souls from degradation. So generosity is also a quality of those who wish that their souls are not debased. We have thus a case here of mutual charity. They are all, both God and his worshippers, generous. But according to Krishna, the worshipper endowed with knowledge is identical with him, because that discriminating worshipper dwells in him with the faith that he is his sublime goal. In other words, he is God. He is within him. There is no separation between God and him. The same idea is re-emphasized in the next verse.
Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha.
That great soul is indeed most rare who worships me with the knowledge, acquired at the end of many births, that I, Vasudeva, am the only reality. The enlightened sage, who is at last blessed with perception after meditating for many births, undertakes divine adoration with the conviction that Krishna is everything. Such a sage is the most rare. He does not worship any external deity called Vasudeva, but rather feels the presence of God within his own self. This is the man with discrimination, whom Krishna also describes as a seer. Only such realized sages can instruct the human society that is outside them. These seers, who have directly perceived reality, are, according to Krishna, the most rare. So all men should worship God, because he is the giver of spiritual glory as well as pleasure. Yet people do not worship him. This paradox is accounted for in the following verse.
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्तेऽन्यदेवताः तन्तन्नियममास्थाय प्रकृत्या नियताः स्वया.
Driven by the properties of their nature, they who fall from knowledge desire worldly pleasures, and, in imitation of the prevailing customs, worship other gods instead of the one single God. Bereft of discernment because of their craving for sensual pleasures, ignorant men are unable to see that the enlightened sage, the accomplished teacher, and God alone have real worth. So, urged by their nature, or rather by the merits, sanskar, they have earned and stored through many lives, they resort to current creeds and practices, and devote themselves to the worship of other gods. Here, for the first time, the Gita makes mention of other gods with a small g.
Yo yo yam yam tanum bhaktaha shraddhayarchitumicchati तस्य तस्याचलां श्रद्धां तामेव विदधाम्यहम्.
It is I who bestow steadiness on the faith of covetous worshippers according to the nature of the gods they worship. It is God who imparts the quality of unflinching firmness to the devotion of worshippers who adore other gods because they wish for material rewards. It is God who makes the faith in other gods steady. Had these gods really existed, this task would have been accomplished by these entities themselves. But since they are only a myth, it is God who has to render the faith of worshippers in them firm and strong.
Sataya shraddhaya yuktah tasyaradhanamihate labhate cha tatah kaman mayaiva vihitan hitan.
Possessing this strengthened faith, the worshipper devotes himself to his chosen deity with devotion, and through this undoubtedly achieves the enjoyment of desired pleasures, which are also appointed by my laws. Possessed of faith that is propped up by the one God, the desire-ridden worshipper devotes himself with renewed vigor to the adoration of some unworthy gods, but surprisingly, he too is rewarded with the desired satisfaction. But this satisfaction is also a gift from the one God. So God is also the bestower of enjoyment of worldly pleasures. Mean pleasure rather than divine bliss is the reward for those who worship other gods for satisfaction of their desires. But in a way, they are rewarded. So there seems apparently nothing wrong with this form of worship. However, this is what Krishna has to say on the issue.
Antavattu phalam tesham tadbhavatyalpamedhasam devan devayajo yanti madbhakta yanti mamapi.
But the rewards of these deluded men are finite, because they only attain to the gods they worship, whereas the man who worships me, howsoever he does it, realizes me. The prizes won by these ignorant men are destructible. They are impermanent because they are worldly pleasures, which all have a beginning and an end. The pleasures that are with us today slip away from us tomorrow. Men who worship other gods acquire powers that are themselves perishable. The whole world, from the level of divinities to that of the lowest creatures, is mutable and subject to death. On the contrary, the man who worships God attains to him, and so to the ineffable peace that descends on the soul after he is united with God. Yogeshwar Krishna had exhorted Arjuna earlier to foster gods with a small g, that is, pious impulses through the observance of yajna. Good fortune accrues from an increase and strengthening of these riches. And ultimately, with gradual progress, there is the attainment of perception and supreme peace. In this context, the word gods, with a small g, represent forces of piety by which the divinity of God, the one God, is secured. These godly impulses that have to be fostered are the means for salvation, and their 24 attributes are enumerated in chapter 16. The righteousness which garners the sanctity of God within the worshipper's heart is named God with a small g. It was at the outset something internal, but with the passage of time, people began to visualize these qualities in palpable forms. So idols were made. The Karmakand was devised, and truth was lost sight of. Krishna has attempted to refute the misconception about gods and goddesses in verses 20 through 23 of the present chapter, naming, quote, other gods, quote, for the first time here in the Gita. He has emphatically said that they do not exist. Whenever faith declines or grows feeble, it is he who supports it and makes it firm, and it is also he who provides rewards for this faith. But these rewards are finite and perishable. Fruits are destroyed, gods are destroyed, and worshippers of these gods are also destroyed. So only the ignorant who are lacking in discrimination worship other gods. Later, Krishna will even go to the extent of affirming that such worship is itself an impiety, in chapter 9, verse 23.
Avyaktam vyaktimapannam manyante mama buddhayah param bhavamajananto mamavyayamanuttama.
Wanting in wisdom and oblivious of the reality that I am immaculate and beyond the mind and senses, men regard my manifestation as a physical incarnation. There is nothing like gods, and the rewards too, for their worship are ephemeral. All this notwithstanding, all men are not devoted to God, the one God. This is so because men who are bereft of discernment are, as we have seen in the last verse, only inadequately aware of the one God's perfection and magnificence. It is for this reason that they deem the unmanifest God as assuming a human form. In other words, Krishna was a yogi in the body of a man, verily, a Yogeshwar, Lord of Yoga. The one who is a yogi himself and has the ability to impart yoga to others is called a Yogeshwar. He is an accomplished teacher. Adopting the right form of worship, and with gradual refinement, sages also come to abide in that state. Although wearing the apparel of a human body, they at last abide in the formless, unmanifest God. But ignorant men yet regard them as ordinary human beings. How can they be God, these men think, when they were born just like them? They are hardly to blame for this, for their deluded minds, wherever they look, see only the external form. Yogeshwar Krishna now explains why they are unable to see the spirit embodied within the physical body.
Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavritah mudhoyam nabhijanati loko mamajamauvyayam.
Hidden behind my Yogmaya, I am not perceived by all, and this ignorant man does not know me, the birthless and immutable God. For an ordinary man, Maya, the power by which God evolves the physical universe, is like a thick screen behind which God is completely hidden. Beyond this Yogmaya, or the practice of yoga, there is also another curtain. It is only by a constant and long practice of yoga that the worshipper reaches the culminating point of yoga, where the hidden God is perceived. Yogeshwar Krishna says that he is hidden by his Yogmaya, and only they who have secured yoga can know him. Since he is not manifest to all, the ignorant and unwise man does not know him. the birthless, who is not going to be born again, eternal, who cannot be destroyed, and unmanifest, who is not going to be manifest again. Arjuna initially regarded Krishna as just another mortal. But after he is enlightened and his vision is enlarged, he begins to plead and beg. By and large, it is only too true that we are no better than blind men in the matter of recognizing the unmanifest soul of sages and great men.
Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kaschana.
I know, O Arjuna, all beings that have been or will be in the past, present, and future, but no one knows me without true devotion. Why it is so is explained in the next verse.
Ichchadvesha samuthena dvandva mohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa.
All beings in the world fall into ignorance, O Bharat, because of the contradictions of attachment and repugnance, and of happiness and sorrow. All men are victims of delusion because of the endless dualities of material nature, and so fail to know God, Krishna. Does it imply that no one will know him? In Krishna's words,
Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dridhavrata.
But they who worship me in every way are selflessly engaged in good deeds, free from sin and delusion, arising from the conflicts of attachment and repulsion, and of firm intent. Freed from evil and conflicting passions, the doers of virtuous action, which brings the worldly life of birth and death to a final end, and which has been variously described as worthy action, ordained action, and the deed of yajna, worship and adore him to achieve redemption. Here it is evident beyond any doubt that the way to God realization is according to Krishna only through an accomplished teacher, an enlightened guru. One who performs the ordained task under the guidance of such a mentor acquires mastery of spiritual capacity as well as perfect action. This is also further illustrated in the following verses.
Jara marana mokshaya mamashritya yatanti ye te brahma tadvidu kritsnam adhyatmam karma chakhilam.
Only they who strive for liberation from the cycle of birth and death, by finding shelter under me, succeed in knowing God, spiritual wisdom, and all action. Knowledge of God, of the kinship of the individual and universal soul, and of all action prepares a man spiritually to take refuge in God and seek the ultimate liberation. Along with this,
Sadhibhutadhidaivam mam sadhiyagyam chaye viduh prayanakale picha mam te viduryukta चेतसः.
They who know me as the presiding spirit in all beings, Adibut, and gods, Adidev, and in Yagya, Adiyagya, and whose minds are fixed on me, know me at the end. Men who know Krishna also know the Supreme Spirit that animates all beings, all gods, and Yagya. They whose minds are absorbed in him know the God in Krishna, dwell in him, and attain to him forever. In verses 26 and 27, Krishna has said that men do not know him because they are ignorant. But they who aspire to be rid of delusion know him along with God, the embodiment of perfection, the identity between him and the individual soul, as well as the material universe, and perfect action. In brief, the immaculate nature of the Spirit that dwells in all beings, gods, and Yagya. The source of all this is a seer, one who has realized the truth, a realized sage, an accomplished teacher. So it is not that this awareness is impossible to acquire, but there is an appointed way by following which alone can a man hope to possess this perfect knowledge. Conclusion. Yogeshwar Krishna has said in this chapter that they who surrender themselves to him and practice selfless action know him perfectly. But hardly one among thousands endeavors to know him, and hardly one among those who try really knows him. The worshipper who has had a direct perception of him knows him not as a corporal body, a clod of earth, but as the all-pervading Spirit. The eightfold nature is his lower, insensate nature. But infusing its depths, there is the Spirit which is his conscious nature. All beings arise from the association of these two natures. Krishna is the root of all creation. It is he who has made both the radiance of light and the valor of men. He is the selfless manliness of the strong, and he too is the sacred aspiration of his devotees. All desires are forbidden, but Arjuna is told to cherish the desire to realize him. The emergence of this one worthwhile craving is also a blessing from him. The desire to be united with God is the only desire that is in tune with the essence of Dharma. Krishna has further said that although he is the creator of the three properties of nature, he is also beyond them. He has attained to the Supreme Spirit and dwells in him. But the deluded who are given to worldly pleasures worship other gods rather than him, although there is no such entity as these gods. But it is he, Krishna, again, who steadies their faith in the stone, water, tree, or whatever else they worship. It is also he who stands behind these objects to reward their worshippers with what they may yearn for, because there is in them, as such, neither any good nor any joy. Ignorant and unwise men do not worship him because, hidden behind his Yog-maya, he appears to them as just an ordinary mortal. It is only by continuous meditation that seekers can pierce through the pall of Maya and know the unmanifest essence of his physical incarnation. He cannot be known without this. He has four kinds of devotees: coveters of rewards, the distressed, men who desire to know him, and men of knowledge. The wise sage, who is at last blessed with perception after practicing meditation over the span of many births, becomes one with Krishna. In other words, it is only by contemplation through a number of lives that God can be attained. But men who are afflicted with attachment and aversion can never know him. On the other hand, they who perform the ordained action, which is worship, in a state of freedom from the delusions of worldly attraction and repulsion, and who are diligently engaged in contemplation to be liberated from mortality, know him perfectly. They know him along with the all-pervasive God, perfect action, Adhyatam, Adhidaiv, and Yagya. They dwell in him and remember him at the end, so that they never lose his memory thereafter. The chapter may thus be summed up as a discourse on the perfect knowledge of God, or what we may call immaculate knowledge. Thus concludes the 7th chapter in the Upanishad of Srimad Bhagavad Gita on the knowledge of the Supreme Spirit, the discipline of yoga, and the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna entitled Samagra Gyan, or Immaculate Knowledge. Thus concludes Swami Adgadanand's exposition of the 7th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in Yatharth Gita. Hari Om Tat Sat. Every religion all over the world can be seen as the distant echo of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, such as Mahavir, Gautam Buddha, Nanak, Kabir, and others. These cassettes of the Gita are being presented for self-realization for seekers everywhere. Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Yatharth Gita. Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 6. The Yoga of Meditation. Whenever there is rank growth in the name of Dharma, of too many customs and practices, of forms of worship and prayer, and of schools and sects, some great soul makes his appearance, his advent, to demolish them, and to install and strengthen the one and only God, as well as to broaden the path of action that leads to him. The practice of renouncing action, and thus of being known for wisdom, were also all too prevalent in the age of Krishna. That explains why Krishna affirms, for the 4th time, at the beginning of this chapter, that action is an essential, inevitable requirement of the ways of both knowledge and selfless action.
Anashritah karma phalam karyam karma karoti yah sasannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyah.
The Lord said, "The man who performs the ordained task without desiring its fruits, rather than the one who just gives up lighting the sacred fire or action, is a sannyasi and a yogi." Krishna insists that only that man who has made true renunciation or achieved yoga engages in the one action that is worthy of doing with absolutely no desire for any rewards. No one becomes a sannyasi or a yogi by just desisting from the ordained action. There are many kinds of work, but out of them, the action which is fit to be undertaken and which is ordained is only one. And this one action is yagya, which means worship, the one means for the attainment of God. The practice of it is action, and the man who does it is a sannyasi and a yogi. If a man has just stopped lighting fire, or tells himself complacently that he has no use for action because he possesses self-knowledge. He is neither a sannyasi nor a doer of selfless action. Krishna further speaks about this.
Yam sannyāsamiti prāhu yogam tam vidhi pandava nayya sannyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaśchana.
Remember, O Arjuna, that yoga, selfless action, is the same as renunciation, knowledge. For no man can be a yogi without a total rejection of desire. What we know as renunciation is also yoga, for no man can be a yogi without giving up all his desires. In other words, sacrifice of desire is essential for men who have chosen either of the two ways. Superficially, it appears so easy, for all that we need to do in order to become a yogi sannyasi is to claim that we are free from desire. But according to Krishna, it is by no means so.
Arurukshor munir yogam karma karanamuchyate yogarudhasya tasyaiva shama karanamuchyate.
Whereas selfless action is the means for the contemplative man who wishes to achieve yoga, a total absence of will is the means for one who has attained to it. Performance of action to achieve yoga is the way for the reflective man who aspires to selfless action. But when repeated practice of the deed gradually brings one to the stage at which the final outcome of selfless action emerges, absence of all desire is the means. One is not rid of desire before this stage. And
Yada hinendriyartheshu na karma svanushajyate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudhastadochyate.
a man is said to have achieved yoga when he is unattached to both sensual pleasure and action. This is the stage when a man is not given to sensual pleasure nor to action. When the culmination of yoga is once reached, who is there beyond to strive and look for? So there is no longer any need of even the prescribed task of worship, and therefore of attachment to action. This is the point when attachments are completely broken. This is sannyas, and this is also achievement of yoga. While a worshipper is still on his way and has not yet arrived at this point, there is nothing like renunciation. Krishna then speaks about the profit that accrues from the attainment of yoga.
Uddharedatmanatmanam natmanamavasadaye atmaiva hyatmano bandhu atmaiva ripuratmana.
Since the soul enshrined in a man is his friend as well as his foe, it is binding on a man to lift himself by his own effort rather than degrade himself. It is a man's duty to work for the salvation of his soul. He must not tempt him to damnation, for the embodied soul is both his friend and enemy. Let us now see in Krishna's words when the self is a friend and when an adversary.
Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitah anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat.
The self is a friend to the man who has overcome his mind and senses, but he is an enemy to one who has failed to do so. To the man who has vanquished his mind and senses, the soul within is a friend, but to the man who has not subdued his mind and senses, he is an enemy. In the 5th and 6th verses, Krishna thus insists repeatedly that a man should redeem his self by his own effort. He must not degrade him, because the self is a friend. Besides him, besides the self, there is neither any friend nor any enemy. It is so because if a man has restrained his mind and senses, his soul acts as a friend and brings him the highest good. But if a man's mind and senses are not restrained, his soul turns into an enemy that drags him to rebirth in lower forms of life and to endless misery. Men are fond of saying, "I am soul, so there is nothing for us to worry about." We cite evidence from the Gita itself. Is not it said there, we ask, that weapons cannot pierce and fire cannot burn and wind cannot wither the self? He, the deathless, immutable, and universal, is therefore me. Believing so, we pay little heed to the warning in the Gita that this soul within us can also descend to an inferior, degraded level. Fortunately, however, he can also be saved and elevated. And Krishna has made known to Arjuna the action which is worthy of being done and which leads the soul to absolution. The following verse indicates the qualities of a benign, friendly self.
जितात्मनः प्रशान्तस्य परमात्मा समाहितः शीतोष्णसुखदुःखेषु तथा मानापमानयोः.
God is ever and inseparably present in the serene heart of the self-abiding man who is unmoved by the contradictions of heat and cold, happiness and sorrow, and fame and infamy. God dwells inextricably in the heart of the man who rests in his own self and reacts evenly to the dualities of nature, such as heat and cold, pain and pleasure, and honor and humiliation. Perfect repose flows through one who has conquered the mind along with the senses. This is the stage when the soul is liberated.
ज्ञानविज्ञानतृप्तात्मा कूटस्थो विजितेन्द्रियः युक्त इत्युच्यते योगी समलोष्टाश्मकाञ्चनः.
The yogi, whose mind is quenched with knowledge, both divine and intuitive, whose devotion is steady and constant, who has conquered his senses well, and who makes no distinction between objects ostensibly as different as earth, rock, and gold, is said to have realized God. The yogi who has achieved this state is said to be endowed with yoga. He has reached the crowning point of yoga, which Yogeshwar Krishna has portrayed in verses 7 through 12 in chapter 5. Perception of God and the consequent enlightenment are knowledge. The worshipper is but groveling in the mire of ignorance if there is even the slightest distance between him and the adored God, and the desire to know him remains unfulfilled. What is called intuitive knowledge, Vigyan, here is knowledge of God's functioning through things, acts, and relations, that is, the manifest universe, which reveal how he is all-pervading, how he prompts, how he guides innumerable souls simultaneously, and how he is knower of all times, past, present, and future. He begins to guide from the very moment when he makes his advent in a heart as the revered one. But the worshipper is unable to know this at the initial stage. It is only when he has reached the culmination of his contemplative exercise that he gains full awareness of God's ways. This is Vigyan. The heart of the man who is accomplished in yoga is satiated with this achievement, combined with his knowledge of God and accurate insight. Continuing with his account of this adept in yoga, Krishna adds,
सुहृन्मित्रार्युदासीन मध्यस्थद्वेष्य बन्धुषु साधुष्वपि च पापेषु समबुद्धिर्विशिष्यते.
That man is indeed superior, who views all with an equal mind, friends and foes, the antagonistic, indifferent, neutral or jealous, kinsmen, and the righteous, as well as sinners. After perception of God, a sage is both equal and even-minded. Krishna said in the last chapter that realized sages, who are blessed with knowledge and discrimination, regard with an impartial eye a Brahmin, an outcast, and animals so diverse as a cow, a dog, and an elephant. The verse under discussion complements what was said before. That man is doubtlessly a man of excellence, who looks equally at all kinds of people, from the highest to the lowest, from the most virtuous to the most wicked, and from the most loving to the most malicious, irrespective of their feelings for him. He looks at the course of souls within them, rather than at their external deeds. The only difference he therefore sees between diverse beings is that while some have ascended to higher steps and gotten close to the state of purity, others have lagged behind and are still lingering on the lower steps. All the same, he sees the capacity for salvation in all. In the next 5 verses, Krishna describes how a man comes to the possession of yoga, how he practices yajna, the nature of the place where the deed is performed, the seat and the posture of the worshipper, the laws which regulate his food and recreation, and sleep and wakefulness, and the quality of effort required for the accomplishment of yoga. The Yogeshwar has done this so that we too are enabled to perform the appointed deed of yajna by following his precepts. A brief review of the relevant points is necessary at this stage. Yajna was named in chapter 3, and Krishna said that yajna is the ordained action. In chapter 4, then, he elaborated the nature of yajna, in which the outgoing breath is sacrificed to the incoming breath, the incoming breath offered as oblation to the outgoing breath, and the mind is restrained through serenity of the vital life winds. The precise meaning of yajna is, as we have seen, worship, the deed that enables the worshipper to traverse the path to the adored God. Krishna has also dwelt upon it in chapter 5. But matters such as the seat of the worshipper, the place of worship, the posture of the worshipper, and the manner of worship have not yet been touched upon. It is only now that these subjects are taken up.
Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi sthitah ekaki yata chittatma nirashira parigraha.
The yogi, engaged in self-conquest, should devote himself to the practice of yoga in loneliness in a secluded place, controlling his mind, body, and senses, and rid of desire and acquisitiveness. Being all alone in a place where there are no distractions, restraint of mind, body, and senses, and a complete rejection of attachments are all essential for a man who is engaged in the task of self-realization. The following verse contains an account of the place and the seat which are conducive to the exercise.
शुचौ देशे प्रतिष्ठाप्य स्थिरमासनमात्मनः नात्युच्छ्रितं नातिनीचं चैलाजिनकुशोत्तरम्.
At a clean spot, he should devise a seat of kush grass or deerskin covered with a piece of cloth, which is neither too high nor too low. Cleanliness of place is a question of sweeping and wiping it to keep it neat and tidy. In such a clean place, the worshipper should make for himself a seat of grass or deerskin, on top of which there is spread a cover of fabric such as silk or of wool. However, the seat may also be just a simple wooden board. But whatever it is, it should be firm and neither too high nor too low. The intent behind all this is that something should be spread on the ground to cover it. It may be anything: skin, a mat, a piece of any kind of cloth, or even a wooden plank. It is important that the seat is not shaky. Again, it should be neither too high from the ground nor too low. My revered teacher, Maharajaji, used to sit on a seat that was about 5 inches high. Once, it so happened that some devotees got him a marble seat that was about 1 foot high. Maharajaji sat on it only once and said, "No, this is too high. A sadhu should not sit too high. It only makes them vain." That does not mean, though, that they should sit too low either, for that gives rise to a sense of inferiority, of contempt for oneself. So he had the marble seat put away in the forest. Maharajaji never went there, and neither does anybody else now. That really was an exercise in a practical lesson by the great man. So the seat of a worshipper should not be too high. If it is too high, vanity will overtake him even before he commences the task of divine adoration. After thus cleaning a spot and making a firm and reasonably elevated seat on it,
तत्रैकाग्रं मनः कृत्वा यतचित्तेन्द्रियक्रियः उपविश्यासने युञ्जात् योगमात्मविशुद्धये.
he should then sit on it and practice yoga, concentrating his mind and restraining the senses for self-purification. Next, then, the posture of sitting. According to the provision, meditation is done in a sitting posture. The manner in which the worshipper should sit while engaged in contemplation is taken up.
Samankaya shiro grivam dharayannachalam sthirah samprekshya nasikagram swam dishaschanavalokayan.
Holding his body, head, and neck firmly erect, his eyes should concentrate on the tip of the nose, looking neither right nor left. In the course of meditation, the worshipper should keep his body, neck, and head straight, steady, and unmoving, like a column of wood, as it were. Sitting erect and firm like this, he should keep his eyes fixed on the tip of his nose. Rather than meaning that he should watch the tip of the nose, the directive is that the eyes should look straight in line with the nose. The tendency of eyes of restlessly flitting here and there must be curbed. Looking straight in line with the nose, the worshipper should sit unmoving, and
प्रशान्तात्मा विगतभिः ब्रह्मचारि व्रते स्थितः मनः संयम्य मच्चित्तो युक्त आसीत मत्परः.
abiding in continence, fearless, serene at heart, alert and restrained in mind, he should surrender himself firmly to me. What actually does continence, brahmacharya vrat, celibacy mean? People usually say that it is restraint of the sexual urge, but it has been the experience of sages that such restraint is impossible so long as the mind is associated with objects, sights, touch, and sounds which inflame the urge. A true celibate, brahmachari, is rather one who is engaged in the task of realizing God, Brahm. The brahmachari is a man of Brahm-like conduct, a doer of the appointed task of yajna that leads men to attainment and ultimate dissolution in the eternal, immutable God. While doing it, the external sensations of touch and of all such contacts of the mind and other senses have to be excluded in order to concentrate the mind on contemplation of God, on the incoming and the outgoing breath, and on meditation. There are no external memories when the mind rests on God. So long as these memories last, the absorption in God is incomplete. Currents of deviation flow through the mind, not through the body. When the mind is wholly occupied with its adoration of God, not only does the sexual urge, but all the other physical urges also cease. So dwelling in conduct that will take him to God, free from fear, in a state of repose, and with a restrained mind, the devoted worshipper should surrender himself totally to an accomplished teacher. But what is the outcome of all this?
युञ्जन्नेवं सदात्मानं योगी नियतमानसः शान्तिं निर्वाणपरमां मत्संस्थामधिगच्छति.
The yogi with a restrained mind, who thus meditates on me incessantly, at last attains to the sublime peace that dwells in me. The yogi who thus always reflects on Krishna, an ideal accomplished teacher who dwells in God, with a controlled mind achieves his sublime peace. So Arjuna is told to constantly devote himself to the task. The treatment of the subject is now almost complete. In the next 2 verses, Krishna then points out the importance of physical discipline, regulated food, and recreation for the worshipper who aims at the conquest of ultimate bliss.
नात्यश्नतस्तु योगोऽस्ति न चैकान्तमनश्नतः न चाति स्वप्नशीलस्य जाग्रतो नैव चार्जुन.
This yoga, O Arjuna, is neither achieved by one who eats too much or too little, nor by one who sleeps too much or too little. Moderation in food and sleep are necessary for a man who wishes to be a yogi. Now, if the man who eats and sleeps immoderately cannot achieve yoga, who can?
युक्ताहार विहारस्य युक्तचेष्टस्य कर्मसु युक्तस्वप्नावबोधस्य योगो भवति दुःखः.
Yoga, the destroyer of all grief, is achieved only by those who regulate their food and recreation, who strive according to their capacity, and who sleep in moderation. If a man eats too much, he is overtaken by lethargy, sleep, and negligence, and the act of meditation is simply not possible in such a condition. On the contrary, fasting will weaken the body, and there will not be enough strength to even sit straight and firm. According to my revered teacher, one should eat a little less than one's need. Recreation, as understood here, is walking according to the available space. Some physical exercise is a necessity. Circulation is slowed down in the absence of such exertion, and one falls prey to illness. How much a man sleeps or remains awake is determined by age, food, and habit. The most exalted Maharajaji used to tell us that a yogi should sleep for 4 hours and be constantly engaged in meditation. Men who curb their sleep by force, however, soon lose their sanity. Along with all these, there should also be sufficient effort for the accomplishment of the undertaken task, for without this, the act of worship cannot be carried out well. He succeeds in achieving yoga who excludes all thoughts of external objects from his mind, and who is constantly engaged in meditation. This is what Krishna emphasizes again.
Yada viniyatam chittam atmanyevavatisthate nispruha sarvakamebhyo yukta ityuchyate tada.
A man is said to be endowed with yoga when, restrained by the practice of selfless action and contented with self, his mind is freed from all desires. Thus, when disciplined by the practice of selfless action, the mind of a man is firmly centered on God and is indeed dissolved in him, and when there remains no desire, the worshipper is said to have attained to yoga. Let us now see what a well-restrained mind is.
Yatha deepo nivatastho ningate sopama smrita yogino yata chittasya yunjato yogamatmana.
An analogy is usually drawn between the lamp whose flame does not flicker because there is no wind, and the fully restrained mind of a yogi engaged in contemplation of God. When a lamp is kept where there is not a whiff of air, its wick burns steadily, and the flame goes straight up. It does not tremble. So it is used as a simile for the subdued mind of a yogi who has completely given himself up to God. However, the lamp is just an illustration. The kind of lamp that is spoken of here is now going almost out of use. So let us take yet another example. When a stick of incense is burnt, its smoke rises straight up if it is undisturbed by wind. But this again is no more than an analogy between smoke and the mind of a yogi. True that the mind has been conquered and restrained, but it is still there. What spiritual splendor is realized when the restrained mind also is dissolved?
Yatro paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pashyannatmani tushyati.
In the state in which even the yoga-restrained mind is dissolved by a direct perception of God, he, the worshipper, rests contented in his self. This state is achieved only by a constant and long practice of yoga. In the absence of such exercise, there can be no restraint of the mind. So when the intellect, the refined mind that has been curbed by yoga, also ceases to be because it is absorbed in God, the worshipper perceives him through his self and abides with contented happiness in his own self. He apprehends God, but he dwells contented in his soul. In the moment of attainment, he sees God, face to face as it were, but the very next moment he finds his own self overflowing with the eternal glories of that God. God is immortal, constant, unmanifest, and vital, and now the worshipper's soul also is imbued with these divine attributes. True, but now it is also beyond thought. So long as desire and its urges exist, we cannot possess the self. But when the mind is restrained and then dissolved by direct perception, the very next moment after the visionary experience, the embodied soul is endowed with all the transcendental qualities of God. And it is for this reason that the worshipper now lives happily and contented in his own self. This self is what he really is. This is the point of crowning glory for him. The idea is further developed in the next verse.
Sukhamadyantikam yattat buddhigrahyamatīndriyam vetti yatra na caivayam stitaschalati tattvatah.
After knowing God, he, the yogi, dwells forever and unwavering in the state in which he is blessed with the eternal, sense-transcending joy that can be felt only by a refined and subtle intellect. And such is the state after attainment in which the worshipper lives forever and from which he never strays. Moreover,
Yam labdhva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tatah yasmin sthito na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate.
in this state in which he believes that there can be no greater good than the ultimate peace he has found in God, he is unshaken by even the direst of all griefs. After he is once blessed with God's transcendental peace, settled firmly in the state of his realization, the yogi is freed from all grief, and now even the most painful sorrow cannot affect him. It is so because the mind that feels is now itself dissolved. So,
Tam vidya dukkha sanyoga viyogam yoga sangitam sanishchayena yoktavyo yogo nirvinna chetasa.
it is a duty to practice this yoga, untouched by miseries of the world, with vigor and determination, and without a sense of ennui. That which is equally free from worldly attraction and repulsion is named yoga. Yoga is experiencing the final beatitude. Attainment of the ultimate essence that is God is yoga. Engaging in this yoga without a sense of monotony or boredom, ennui, and with resolution is a sacred obligation. He who is patiently engaged in selfless action is the one who succeeds in achieving yoga.
Sankalpa prabhavan kaman त्यक्त्वा सर्वान् शेषतः मनसैवेन्द्रियग्रामम् विनियम्य समन्ततः.
Abandoning all desire, lust, and attachment, and pulling in by an exercise of the mind the numerous senses from all sides. It is a man's duty to sacrifice all the desires that arise from will, along with attachment to worldly pleasures, and restrain well with his mind the senses from straying here and there. And after having done this,
शनैः शनैरुपरमेद् बुद्ध्या धृतिगृहीतया आत्मसंस्थं मनः कृत्वा न किञ्चिदपि चिन्तयेत्.
his intellect should also rein in the mind firmly and make it contemplate nothing except God, and thus, step by step, he should proceed towards the attainment of final liberation. The final dissolution in God comes only gradually with the practice of yoga. When the mind is fully under control, the self is united with the Supreme Spirit. However, at the beginning, when the worshipper has just set out on the path, he has to concentrate his mind patiently on and think of nothing else except God. The way of this spiritual enterprise is that attainment comes only with constant application. But at the outset, the mind is restless and refuses to stay at one point. This is what Yogeshwar Krishna speaks of now.
यतो यतो निश्चरति मनश्चञ्चलमस्थिरम् ततस्ततो नियम्यैतद् आत्मन्येव वशं नयेत्.
Doing away with the causes that make the inconstant and fickle wander among worldly objects, he should devote his mind to God alone. Strictly keeping out all allurements that tempt the changeable and restless mind to associate with worldly objects, the worshipper should try repeatedly to confine it to the self. It is often contended that the mind should be let free to go wherever it tends to go. After all, where else can it go except to nature, which is also a creation of God? So if it roams amidst nature, it is not transgressing the bounds of God. But according to Krishna, this is a misconception. There is no room for such beliefs in the Gita. It is Krishna's injunction that the very organs through which the mind strays here and there should be curbed in order to devote it solely to God. Restraint of mind is possible. But what is the consequence of this restraint?
प्रशान्तमनसं येनं योगिनं सुखमुत्तमम् उपैति शान्तरजसं ब्रह्मभूतमकल्मषम्.
The most sublime happiness is the lot of the yogi whose mind is at peace, who is free from evil, whose passion and moral blindness have been dispelled, and who has become one with God. Nothing is superior to the happiness that comes to this yogi, for this is the happiness that results from identity with God. And this ultimate bliss comes only to that man who is perfectly at peace in his heart and mind, free from sin, and whose property of passion and moral blindness has been subdued. The same idea is stressed again.
युञ्जन्नेवं सदात्मानं योगी विगतकल्मषः सुखेन ब्रह्म संस्पर्श